Welcome to the Aggressive Life. What comes to mind when you think about explorers and adventurers? Maybe you think of Christopher Columbus, Lewis and Clark. My personal favorite is Ernest Shackleton in the story of the Endurance. Utterly mesmerizing read if you haven't read that. Crazy. Today, we've got a new name for you. Colin O'Brady. Colin O'Brady. He's from Ireland. He's Irish descent. He does not have the Irish accent. I keep trying to find somebody on the Aggressive Life who's got an Irish accent who will sing Kellogg's Lucky Charms. They're magically delicious. I thought I had my taker because there's surely a real life adventurer would be that adventurous, but no, Colin doesn't have a Irish accent, even though he's obviously.
Sorry to disappoint.
Sorry, you did disappoint. You really did. Because I know a guy who's done the shit you've done would totally be up for something like singing Kellogg's Lucky Charms. It's great. Well, let me make sure everyone knows what you've done. Colin is a 10-time world record-breaking explorer and endurance athlete who achieved the impossible first. It's history's first solo, unsupported, completely human power crossing of Antarctica. That's right. No sled dogs, no resupply points, no partner. He pulled a 300-plus pound sled, battling wind chills as low as negative 80 degrees and paralyzing whiteouts for 54 days. 1,000 miles. And that's just a sliver of the whole story. Colin's achieved a world first ocean row, summited Everest twice, holds a 7-summit speed record, and is a champion triathlete. Sounds remarkable? Well, it is, because he's got a comeback story. I could tell the thing he's come back from, but let's just talk about Colin and what he's actually come back from. He's going to share wisdom today in our podcast, and he also shares wisdom of his aggressive life in the new book called The 12-Hour Walk, Invest One Day, Conquer Your Mind, and Unlock Your Best Life. Welcome to the Aggressive Life, Colin O'Brady.
O'Brady. Well, there's a story behind my last name, actually, is I am American. My parents are American, grandparents American, but I think we came over on the boat, 4 generations back or something like that. But my dad's last name's O'Connor, actually. My mom's last name's Brady. So I was born on a kind of a hippie upbringing, and they combined their last names to make O'Brady. So I don't even have my parents' last names either.
Fascinating. Oh, that's cool, man. So Tell us about your comeback story. I thought I'd just hear people hear your version of the pain and difficulty and all that stuff. What happened?
Yeah, so, you gave me a great intro with all those accolades and world records and crossing continents and all that. But, back 14 or so years ago, my life looked nothing like this. I was a collegiate swimmer. I swam at Yale, so I was an athlete. But after college, I had no money, but I always dreamed of traveling the world. So I painted some houses as a kid, kind of like socked away a few $1,000s here, a few $1,000s there, and said, when I graduate from college, I'm going to go kind of spread my wings in the world as a young person. Took off on a trip in 2007 alone, just surfboard backpack, sleeping on floors in youth hostels and hitchhiking around through New Zealand, Australia, and Fiji, where I ultimately actually met my wife at the front end of this trip, my now wife. So that was a win for this trip for sure. But then I found myself on a beach in rural Thailand. And I guess because I was 22 years old and didn't have a fully formed prefrontal cortex, so to speak, I saw a guy jumping a flaming jump rope, and I thought, hey, that looks like a good idea. And I jumped that flaming jump rope, and in an instant, my life changed. The rope wrapped around my legs, lit my body completely on fire to my neck. Survival mode kind of kicked in when I needed it most, and I jumped into the ocean to extinguish the flames, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned, particularly my legs and feet. And the worst part about it, obviously the pain was immense, but I was also really in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I was in Thailand, but I was actually on a small island on the Gulf of Thailand, no ambulance. I had a moped ride down a dirt path to a 1-room nursing station. Underwent, about 8 surgeries in a couple of rural hospitals in Thailand where there was a cat running around my bed and across my chest in this sort of makeshift ICU. I mean, I was like really pretty far away from any, proper medical facilities. And, the worst part about it, I think, despite the physical fatigue, physical pain was really the emotional pain when the doctor came in one day, looked me straight in the eyes, and he said, "Hey, look, Colin, I hate to tell you this, but you'll probably never walk again normally, because the way that my sort of knees and ankle ligaments and everything were so damaged." And so I guess the silver lining in this whole story is my incredible mother. She arrived to Thailand on about the 4th or 5th day by the time she was able to, fly to the other side of the world and find me in this remote part of Thailand. And she just filled me up with positivity. I know now that she was kind of in the hallways crying and pleading with the doctors for good news, but she really never showed me her own fear, her own, nervousness, any of that. She just came into my hospital room with this huge smile on her face, this air of positivity, just her daring me to dream about the future. And she'd say things to me like, "When you get out of here, Colin, let's set a goal. What do you want to do when you get out of here?" And I focused. I said, "Do you think it's possible? Do you think I could one day complete a triathlon?" Which is not something I'd ever done before. And my mother, and the incredible woman she was, she could have easily been like, "I said set a goal, but like, look at your legs, like maybe something more realistic,
Like, walk to the bathroom without me carrying you."
Exactly. But she was like, "Great. If that's what you feel like you want to do, like, let's talk about it. Let's train for it." Literally, she said, "Hey, doc, my son's training for a triathlon." This Thai doctor brought me in some weights thinking I was like out of my mind, but I'm like lifting weights with my arms, obviously couldn't move my legs. And eventually I was in the hospital for a couple months, flown back to Portland, Oregon, where I grew up. I was carried on and off the plane. I was placed in a wheelchair, still hadn't taken a single step by the time I got back to the United States. And then my mom really continued to encourage me. I remember one day I was sitting in my wheelchair in her kitchen, and she said, "Today you got to take one step, Colin, just one step." And she grabbed a wooden chair from our kitchen table and put it one step in front of my wheelchair. She said, "You got to take one step out of this wheelchair and get into this chair in front of you." And then she moved the chair 5 steps away the next day 10 steps away. And then ultimately, a year and a half later, I eventually moved to Chicago, took a job there, and I was, focused on training for triathlon. And so I was working in finance and, signed up for the Chicago Triathlon. And just a year and a half after being burned in this fire, signed up for the race, competed and completed the Chicago Triathlon. But the biggest surprise that was still in store for me that day was my first race ever, told I would never walk again normally. And I get to the finish line. It turns out I actually won the entire Chicago Triathlon, placing first out of about 5,000 other participants on the day. And that opened up a whole different doorway to what you said in your intro of these various other world record expeditions and things like that.
Well, let me ask you some questions here. Just curious. So This was just your basic clothesline jump rope that was on fire that someone was jumping with and you did, and it really just, that thing caught your body on fire that quickly.
You can Google this, like Thailand flaming jump rope or something like that, and it's not like this is like just a made up thing. Like, people do this. It's like fairly common on the beaches in Thailand, when people are just kind of I don't know, they do it. Like, I didn't come up with the idea. Obviously they were doing it like this little resort that I was staying at. It was kind of like double Dutch, like 2 guys on the end of one big long, rope, and the rope itself was doused in kerosene. And what I realized later is that usually, obviously, people do trip or don't jump the rope perfectly, but it usually kind of just knocks off their leg, almost like you're putting your finger through a candle flame. Right. It's only touching you for a second and then bounces off. But they had just lit the rope, and so there was still some excess kerosene on the rope. And so when the rope, it tangled around my legs, but it also splattered my body of excess kerosene up to my neck, and then my neck and whole body completely ignited. So it was just kind of obviously my own fault for jumping a flaming jump rope in the first place, but then it was kind of the worst case scenario from there.
Dag.
Yeah.
So if you didn't have your mom who was pushing you, what do you think your recovery would have been like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I get to that finish line of the triathlon and find out that I've won the whole Chicago Triathlon. Some people are like, "Oh, did you just think in that moment, wow, I'm a superhuman athlete. I must be so amazing." And I was like, no, quite the opposite. Where my mind went in that moment was immediately back to that Thai hospital, wondering exactly your question. What would have happened had my mom not forced me to look towards the future and set this measurable goal? And I realized that was a sliding doors moment. I think I was falling into complete defeat, trauma, depression, etc. And my mother kind of snatched me some of the grasp of that and pointed my life in such a different direction. And I think that everything I've done ever since was from that moment. I didn't call it this at the time, but I call it this now. And I kind of a core principle of my new book, The 12-Hour Walk, is I call it a possible mindset, an empowered way of thinking that unlocks a life of limitless possibilities, and I believe that really we all have this ability inside of us. I think all of us as humans have these, untapped reservoirs of human potential, but it's really a matter of kind of unlocking that. And my mother certainly did this through this for me in the face of tragedy.
Well, give us the 30,000 foot view of why the title 12-Hour Walk.
Yeah, so I wrote another book a couple years ago called The Impossible First. It's a New York Times bestselling memoir that I wrote a couple years ago. And that specifically is about my life and becoming the first person in history to cross the entire continent of Antarctica solo, unsupported, and unassisted. And so my first book is really a memoir chronicling that journey, as well as kind of my whole life, the burn accident, all the component parts of my own personal journey, how I got there and how I achieved what many thought was impossible, this solo Antarctica crossing. And you mentioned Ernest Shackleton earlier. He's certainly my favorite in the zeitgeist of exploration, someone who I've gained a ton of inspiration. That book, like you said, The Endurance, is just one of the greatest books, I think, of all time.
They're climbing to get over, was it Elephant Island? They're trying to mountain climb with freaking screws through the bottom of their basic boots, where today with the most high-tech mountain gear you have, people have a hard time doing it.
It's like one of the most impressive stories of survival. And certainly when I was out there pulling my sled across Antarctica, facing, 60, 70 minus wind chill and minus 4-degree temperatures. And I was pulling a 375 pound sled. But I did often think of Shackleton. I was like, well, I'm wearing Gore-Tex. And I'm wearing, and I've got like a sat phone with me. And you're thinking about those guys, they're surviving out there for several years. So a different breed in the early 1900s is so impressive. But the 12-Hour Walk, my new book coming out here. I'm excited. It's coming out right when you guys hear this podcast drop, August 2nd. And I walked every single day in Antarctica for 12 hours. So I pulled my sled 375 pounds, 1,000 miles, 12 hours per day. And I was on my last bite of food when I finished. So I lost about 30, 40 pounds. The reason my sled was so heavy is I couldn't carry enough food really to feed me. So I was on a 3,000 calorie deficit, hips and ribs sticking out. I was actually racing this other guy and ended up beating him by a few days. That's a whole other story. But then during the COVID lockdown, in the spring of 2020, I think we all experienced this, kind of being locked in our houses, not knowing what's happening in the world, really disorienting time, I think, for everyone. And I had completed my Antarctica crossing a couple years before that in 2018. And I was kind of in a funk sitting at my house in Oregon at the time. And I was like, man, when was the last time I felt peace and calm and just really kind of, I don't know, just happy, I guess. And strangely, it was in these moments in Antarctica. Despite the challenge of it, I found these deep meditative flow states within myself, pulling my sled every single day. And so I said to my wife, hey, I'm just going to go for a walk all day today. I'm going to walk out our front door in Oregon and I'm going to go for a walk. And I ended up staying out there for 12 hours, the same duration of time that I pulled my sled. And I came back, and for the first time during COVID lockdown, I felt just this semblance of just calm in my own body, mind, and spirit. And I realized I'm proud of my Antarctica crossing, but I realized that any single person, any of us, can benefit from taking a day to ourselves, putting our phones in airplane mode, being in silence and stillness, and literally going for a walk. And so the entire book is about how we can overcome limiting beliefs. And I think that there's a power that we have inside of ourselves and our own minds to cultivate, like I said, what I call a possible mindset. So I'll ask you this question, which is, you got a podcast. I'm sure you're on social media. I am as well. All those things. Like, what's the longest that you have spent in your adult life unplugged? And what I mean by unplugged is every time you look at your phone, the clock resets. Every single time you talk to your kids, or the TV's on, or you listen to the radio or podcast, or whatever, you have external input, the clock resets. What would you say is the longest amount of time that you've spent?
Oh gosh. Since I owned a cell phone?
Right.
Because before that, it was a lot. I don't know, probably a week. Intentionally, I would have done a week-long fast.
Week-long fast by yourself? No one there, no one talking to you?
No, I wouldn't. No, not a week-long fast in isolation with everything. Yeah, no.
Yeah. So just by yourself, like actually like alone.
Are you asking about the amount of time alone or the amount of time absent from a screen?
No, but like the screen is one element, but yeah, alone. Just actually alone in your
Yeah,
thoughts, not listening to music, not
probably,
talking to anyone.
probably 3 days. Probably
3
three
days.
days, 2 years ago. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So I've asked thousands of people that question. The average response is an hour, maybe.
Right.
My phone died and I happen to be,
Right.
far away from my car or something like that. Right.
Yep.
So really the book is a call to action. The subtitle of the book is 12-hour walk, invest one day, conquer your mind and unlock your best life. And I really fundamentally believe that we have the ability within ourselves to cultivate this possible mindset, but we're so distracted by all the day-to-day things. And so it's really a call to action to say, hey, I'm inviting you to take one day. You don't have to train for it. I don't care if you walk a mile or you walk 50 miles. I don't care how many breaks you take, but the exercise is literally walk out your front door, turn your phone on airplane mode, and spend 12 hours by yourself. No music, no podcast, no nothing, just walking in stillness and silence. And you can have the ambient city noise around where you live or anything like that. It's not like you have to be in like the solitude of the location, but you're just not engaging with anything other than your own thoughts. And the book takes you to these edges of all of these places of adventure. So it takes you to the Drake Passage where I'm rowing a boat across the most treacherous ocean in the world, or it takes you to the summit of Mount Everest, with my wife and I climbing Mount Everest together. It takes you on the journey of Antarctica, but it brings you through the lens of answering these questions. Because I've asked people, what's standing in the way of living your best life? And more often than not, people say, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I don't have the right friends. I don't have the right community. All these limiting beliefs, right? These beliefs we have built up in our mind. And the book is really a simple strategy of breaking down those all through rich storytelling and how we can all overcome them. But really with like I said, one culminating final thing of, as like fun as it has been for me in my last book and to tell my stories of my adventures, I love inviting people into the arena themselves to say, yeah, I could tell you a million stories about crazy adventures that I've been on that are, incredible, that I'm proud of, world record breaking, etc. But I'm inviting you to step into the arena, to have an adventure yourself, invest one day, conquer your mind, unlock your best life, take a walk for 12 hours, and you'll find a new you on the other side.
So you've done a lot of impressive physical things. I've got a hard question for you. A hard question because I think about it a lot and I don't get to ask it a lot, but you're one of these guys who I'd like to ask this question to. So when I ask this question, I want you to know it's in full and complete respect. I just would like to know, okay? And it comes on the heels of Antarctica. I mean, we just touched on Antarctica and triathlon. I mean, your stuff is pretty intense physically. You had the Explorers Grand Slam, which was summiting the tallest peaks on each of the 7 continents and skiing to the last degree of the North and South poles. That's really, really crazy. I could give all the times on all this stuff. It's really, really impressive. Why? Why such intense and extreme physical feats?
Yeah, ever since I was young, I've been personally love sports. I remember watching the Olympics when I was, 7 years old in Barcelona Olympics. I'm 37 now. So 30 years ago, watching the Barcelona Olympics and just being fascinated by athletes and the physicality and kind of what it takes to be the best in the world at something. And so that's always just been a really curiosity and a passion. And my life has followed that a lot. Like I said, I was a nationally ranked swimmer. I swam at Yale. I was a nationally ranked soccer player in high school growing up. So just sports have always been a medium for me where I've been able to sort of explore my own human potential. But I think on the other side of that burn accident, particularly with triathlon, which is, endurance sports, yes, you're racing other people. But what has become even more interesting to me over time has been finding the deeper parts of myself and finding the deeper parts of, the interior parts of my own psyche. And so when I was crossing Antarctica, trying to be the first person to cross in history, of course, there was sort of that achievement or that accolade that was out there as a carrot of kind of gave purpose or direction to that crossing. But ultimately, my first book, The Impossible First, the last chapter of that book is called Infinite Love. The last chapter of the book isn't, I'm awesome, look at me, I did this thing no one's ever done. Because ultimately, I went out there on a spiritual journey, a spiritual quest to feel the sort of edges of my own potential, to be alone within my thoughts and my own psyche. And what I found out there was being all alone, isolated from everything in this place that is literally feels like it's trying to kill you every second because it's so cold and so harsh and so dangerous. I ended up finding this resonance of deep love and compassion and energy and connectedness to soul and purpose. So for me, these expeditions are my way of connecting to that, but like I said, a spiritual journey of sorts. And I think that, I do all this work. I have a nonprofit where I go around to speak to school kids, which I'm really passionate about. And I've had over 1 million kids enrolled in our programs over the years. And one question I love asking students is, what's your Everest? I've climbed Everest twice, but what's your Everest? Kids, it's easy metaphor. What's your big goal? What's your dream? What's your hope? And kids are amazing because kids, I think we are born with what I call this possible mindset. Kids, you ask a 9-year-old kid, what's their Everest? And they're not having all these limiting beliefs standing in their way. They dream with limitless possibilities implicitly. So it's fun to hear these answers. Colin, my Mount Everest is to be the first person in my family to graduate from college. Or my Mount Everest is to make sure the snow leopards are off the endangered species list. I've heard thousands and thousands of responses to that question. But what I've come back around to answer your question is, my Everest, or my canvas, so to speak, of expression in the world is going to the ends of the earth and mountaintops, because I personally derive a lot of pleasure, intrigue, interest from that. And it's been deeply fulfilling for me in my own life. But this is and the reason I love the concept behind the 12-hour walk is that might not be your thing. Look, I don't blame you if you don't want to go to the end of the earth and freeze your butt off by yourself in the middle of nowhere. That's not for everyone. But I do believe that we all have this passion, this zest for life, this desire to find deep fulfillment and joy and happiness and love and community. And I think we all have the ability through different mediums to explore that. My exploration just happens to be in these sort of endurance, extreme environments that light me up.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I'll just take it at face value and say that makes sense. And I could see your face. You're beaming with the radiance of joy right now as you talk about that. That's really good. The reason I ask, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is I'm pretty adventurous. I'm not doing freaking Antarctica. This is kind of stuff that you're doing, but I'm pretty adventurous. So I'm pretty tapped into the kind of the extreme athlete, the adventure kind of folks. And it seems like the guys that are really extreme, I don't want to start naming names right now, but it seems to, from what I know of their story, they're trying to medicate for a hole that's inside their heart. They're trying to overcome a father wound. They're trying to overcome something that, or just block it out. So keep running, keep climbing. And I didn't know if any of that kind of stuff was going on with you. But then when you talked about the burn, it was man, that would have gotten you started. Just like a goal that says, hey, I am back. I am going to be healthy. I don't know. Do you interact with any of those other folks or other peers? Does any of that make sense?
No, it's a great question. Of course, peers in the space and people I admire and look up to and people I consider colleagues who have done a lot of extraordinary things. It's a very insightful question. And I appreciate you asking it. I don't get asked it a lot, but it reminds me, I've been on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple of times and he stopped me. I think it was the first time he was interviewing me. And he was like, in the same vein that you're asking this question, he says to me, I've interviewed a lot of guys like you. Guys have done hardcore stuff or adventure or this or that and the other thing. He's like, every single time I interview someone like that, they're coming from this kind of dark place. He said to me, there's something different about what you're talking about. You're coming about love and wholeness and connection. And again, to me, it's not a criticism or a critique of somebody else's path or whatever, but it's just to say that I don't really come at it from that same standpoint of needing to kind of prove myself or to somebody else or whatever. It's really, what's been beautiful for me also is my wife and I, we really have dreamed up these projects and these adventures together. She's really been my rock in all of this. I didn't talk to anyone when I was in Antarctica except for her on a satellite phone. And I always say to her, I was alone out there. Of course, we know I was alone in the physical space, but energetically, I feel like she walked every single step with me. We have intertwined our souls and our love for one another through these extreme places. And what that has given us in our marriage and in our life has been so invaluable. Like we literally trust each other with our lives. We've put that to the test. And last year, and I write about this in the 12-hour walk, there's a whole chapter on this. She said to me, she's not like a hardcore adventurer. That's not her identity in the world. And, not an athlete, in a traditional sense. She's certainly an active, healthy person, but it's just not her core identity. And she said to me after all this, she says, do you think I can climb Everest one day? And she said that just before COVID. And I was like, we could train you up for it, whatever. I won't spoiler alert the whole thing because I want you to buy the book and read the book and take the walk. But we went on that journey together and ultimately stood on the top of the world together to share that. It wasn't a world record, so to speak. She was the 89th American female to ever summit Everest, 670th female to ever summit Everest. But her journey from effectively a novice to together to literally connecting each other by a rope and ultimately getting ourselves to the top of the world together was one of the most beautiful experiences of my entire life. And so again, to your point, that wasn't to prove to anyone else other than have this deep, meaningful shared experience and kind of test the limits of her potential and our potential together. And we come back into our day-to-day life at our home and with our dogs and our family and whatever. And I think we're stronger for it. It's a beautiful thing.
That's really a good point to make as you go into that with your wife. I want to dig into the Everest thing. I do want to dig into that story in and of itself. But going back to my original question, that does set you apart. The people I'm thinking of, they're not doing anything with their marriage. I don't even know if they're married. I mean, most of them are not married at all, or at least they never talk about it. So the Joe Rogan would notice there's something different about you. That's really insightful because I've had some people say, hey, you should have so-and-so on your podcast. You should have so-and-so and so. And I think I could land them, but it wouldn't be a good conversation because I'd have to put my pastor hat on, which is my day job, and saying, dude, what are you trying to accommodate for? You need some healing here. What? It's okay. Your dad hurt you. You keep trying to earn your dad's approval, and he's not going to be able to give you approval because he's dead now. But you can stop running. Or I could go on. And I'm like, I can't have these people in the podcast just talk about their accomplishments without drilling in. So I thought, okay, let's just try touch in here on Colin. And my gosh, you're giving me like the perfect. Amazing answers. And maybe if I had those people on the podcast and I asked them these things, maybe they would have amazing answers too. I just have never been able to talk with you. So
I'll tell you an interesting story that was a huge turning point for me in my life around this specific topic. Early on in my professional triathlon career, I met my wife in 2007, right before I got burned. We were together for a few years, young in love in our early 20s, which was beautiful. And then I won the Chicago Triathlon and I got the opportunity to have my first sponsor and become a professional triathlete, which, to be clear, is not like the NBA or MLB. It's like still sleeping on my buddies' couches and just riding my bike and trying to, make something of myself in the world. But ultimate race in 25 countries, 6 different continents was a beautiful experience. And my goal was to go to the Olympics, to win an Olympic gold medal. And as a result of that, I really need to travel a ton. That's just the way the international circuit. It's a very international sport. You need to live abroad, be away from home for a long period of time. And I moved to Australia. And I was living with a woman who I was training with. There was about 10 of us over there. I was living with a woman, and she was the current reigning world champion, Olympian, world champion, incredible athlete, one of the best in the world. And at the time, I wasn't married, but Jenna was my girlfriend, of course, now my wife, had strained our relationship, how much traveling I was doing. I'm going to be in Australia for 6 months and we're not going to see each other. It's like really straining on our marriage, ultimately our marriage, our relationship. So I asked this woman, I said, the world champion, I said, what's your favorite race? Like, what's your favorite accomplishment? And then she's won 4 world championships at this point. So I'm assuming she's going to say to me, oh, when I won the Ironman world championships and everyone told me I was amazing and awesome. And she says to me, she goes, Colin, my most important race in my life was when I came second at the Manchester Commonwealth Games. And I said, I don't understand. You've won 4 world championships. How can not one of those be your favorite? And she goes, well, I grew up really poor and my family has never been able to see me race, but she's from the UK. She goes, when I was in Manchester and the race happened to be there, my family was there that day. She says, you know what the loneliest feeling in the world is, Colin? She goes, to stand on top of an Olympic or a world championship podium on the other side of the world and not have a single person there that you love or care about you and your family.
Wow.
And I still have goosebumps, telling that story. And, this happened 12 years ago. Like I said, in my early mid-20s. And I immediately, from that moment onward, I flew home and I said to Jenna, my now wife, I said, I want to pursue this. I want to pursue excellence. I want to be the best in the world at what I try to do, but none of it matters if we're not doing it together. And so if we can't do it together, I was like, I'd rather just do something else. And it was such an important and valuable lesson to me, particularly in the context of what you're talking about, which is a realignment around values and a realignment around balance and a realignment around, you could chase all of these things and end up on the proverbial mountaintop, or in my sense, a literal mountaintop. And if all those other pieces of your life, love, community, family, friendship, all that aren't there, like the accomplishment means nothing. And
right.
So I've really kept that as an anchor and a North Star for me throughout my life.
Well, you got a good thing going on, brother. First of all, you're smiling as you talk. A lot of people don't smile as much as you have, so you got a really good spirit, demeanor about you. So you're doing something right. So well done, good stuff.
I appreciate that.
Speaking of wife, did that burning rope burn your rope? You got any kids?
We are literally right now actively trying. So my rope is fine.
So stuff is working. Stuff's working. The rope is on fire.
Exactly. It came right up to there, but didn't quite get there. Thank God. But yeah, no, we are really excited at this phase of our life to start a family and have kids and all that. So we're very actively trying, and check back with me in a few months and hopefully be one in the oven, so to speak.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Athletic Greens. It's a product I use every day. I started taking AG1 because I don't watch my diet too closely, but I know that I'm getting all the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients I can, as well as hydrating with 12 ounces of water right off the bat at the beginning of the day. One scoop of AG1 has got 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens, and it doesn't taste like it. It actually tastes great. AG1 is a micro habit with big benefits. For less than $3 a day, you can take care of your health and invest in your future. It's recommended by professional athletes, health experts, and me. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packets with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/aggressive life. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/aggressive life to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutrition insurance. So go get you some, and let's get back to the show. I'm curious. There's so many things you're saying, Colin. I'm like, ooh, let's in that. But then I don't want to have the other thing pass too fast. So I'm not forgetting about Everest. I want to dig into Everest in just a moment. But you talked about the professional stuff. Tell me how this works, because this is a lot of jack you're having to lay out for just transportation to Antarctica, let alone supplies and all that stuff. This is I'm starting to see this is your professional gig here. So what does that look like? I mean, how many sponsors do you need? How many hours a day do you train? How do you think about finances with this whole thing? How's it all fit together?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And actually, my book, The 12-Hour Walk, breaks down 10 most common limiting beliefs we have. And I surveyed my Instagram audience and said, like, literally, before I started writing the book, I said, okay, everyone out there, what's the number one thing standing in the way of you living your best life? And I just want to see like how people answer that question. And I received thousands of answers through my Instagram and stuff like that. And the number one thing was money. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough money. And the other 10 are derivative of what people said. I don't have enough time. I don't have the right community. So each chapter in the book, The 12-Hour Walk, breaks down one of these most common limiting beliefs. But one of them, and I was like, hey, great. If everyone's asking the same question about money and finances, like, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. There's an entire chapter in the book dedicated to that and my own personal journey. So I mentioned before, like, didn't grow up with a lot of money. As a kid, I literally, was a place, it's not like I wasn't like afraid that there wasn't gonna be food on the table, but there wasn't much room for extra. We didn't travel a lot. My parents would buy me one pair of shoes at the beginning of the school year and be like, these are your pair of shoes for the whole year, kind of thing. And so, we were, pretty just, basic kind of life, which was a great way to grow up, to be honest, but didn't have a lot of extra. And so when I wanted these big dreams out in the world, it wasn't like I was like, hey, mommy, daddy, whoever, write me a big check because I want to fly to the North Pole. It was like, okay, how are you going to figure out how to get there? Just like you said, the bare bone costs of that are astronomical. Jenna and I, our first project that we dreamed up together, we called it Beyond 7-2, which was the Explorers Grand Slam, climbing the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents and completing expeditions of both the North and South Pole. And at the time, fewer than 50 people had ever completed the Grand Slam. And I was going to attempt to be the first person, the fastest to do it. So I aimed to do all of that in 4 months. So basically back to back to back to back. It's the summit of Everest to Kilimanjaro to North Pole, the place to place to place. So we dreamed this whole thing up. We had just gotten engaged, actually. We dreamed this whole thing up. We said, and when we do this, we want to start a nonprofit for kids and have impact. We went back to our 1-bedroom apartment in Portland with this idea on a whiteboard. And we're like, it's going to cost $500,000, $500,000. And we're, in our mid 20s and we've got like, $10,000 to our name if we like pooled all of our life savings, like total. And this is the moment where most good ideas die because we're like, well, hey, one day I'd love to do that, but I'm not a millionaire. Like, how could I ever pull this thing off? And instead, Jen and I looked at one another. And again, I got to keep coming back to it because I believe so much in it with this possible mindset. Said, great. So we have $10,000. How can we turn that into $5,000 for this project? How do you even get sponsors? We've heard of this thing called sponsorship. We don't even know anything about it. How do we, start a nonprofit? Like there's a bunch of red tape and government forms you have to fill out. What do we have? What are our assets? And this is where I think we define things between a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset, right? The scarcity mindset says, I only have $10,000, so I'm never going to have $500,000. Mm-hmm. The abundance mindset, which is I teach through the book of how to shift towards that abundance mindset, says I have $10,000 right now, but my goal requires me to have $500,000. How do I go about doing that? And ultimately, again, I can go a long story about it, but we took our whole life savings, went to a creative agency and we're like, well, we at least need a great website to be able to convey our idea and look professional when we meet people about it. So we basically bet our entire life savings. And I remember writing the check and being like, well, that was all of our money and saying to Jenna, what if no one wants to sponsor a project? And she winks at me and she goes, well, at least we'll have a cool website. Ha ha ha. And for the next 18 months, I'll tell you what, we tried to meet every single person we possibly could and had every door slammed in our face. No, not a good idea. What do you mean? You've never climbed any mountains. All of these moments where you could easily give up.
Wow.
Then, get this. We're getting close to this. We're still several $100,000 short, and we're thinking, now we might have to give up. But the perseverance is just, I'm like, I gotta keep pushing. Knocked on every single door, tried to get meetings with any person we could. And I'm in a spin class. at a 24-hour fitness near my house because my buddy invited me to spin class. I'm a professional athlete. I'm like, I don't go to spin classes. And he's like, okay, meet this woman. She was a world record holder back in the day. You'll love her, whatever. So I go in, this woman, she's in her mid 50s, but she's super fit. He introduced me to her and he says, hey, meet Kathy. I'm like, hi, Kathy. Nice to meet you. She was a world record holder for the 5K back in the 70s. And she brushed it off, a million years ago, whatever. And she goes, oh, I heard you're trying to do this world record thing. I'm like, yeah. Tell her about it. She's like, cool. Good luck with that. I keep spinning. And I get off the spin bike and I say, oh, Kathy, it was nice to meet you. She walks over. She goes, actually, that's a cool idea. And you're trying to impact kids and kids' health. And I love what you guys are doing. You should talk to my husband. He waves over this guy. You should talk to him about it. We're this random gym, 24-hour fitness by my house. I'm like, okay, whatever. Say to this guy, and I'm not pitching him, literally the 15-second, like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing, start a nonprofit because I'm just passionate about it. Maybe the same way that you see me smiling right now. I'm like, just that way, but I'm just talking about it. And he looks at me, he goes, are you looking for sponsors? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I actually think the company I work at might be able to help you. And I was like, where do you work? And he's like, oh, hold on, let me get you a business card. So he raffles through his gym bag, hands me a business card. I look at it. Mark Parker, CEO, Nike. I'm talking to the CEO of Nike at a random local gym. But the point in the story is the abundance mindset. We could have quit 1,000 steps
Right.
before that, when the first couple people. And in the end of the day, the breakthrough, when we get Nike to come on board and sponsor us, and we have all this impact and work with their nonprofit and all this kind of stuff. I'm really proud of that. But it's just, you never know who you're talking
Right.
to. And the point is don't treat the CEO of Nike different than the Starbucks barista. Go out in the world, put your best foot forward, be kind to every single person, because we're all humans, and really have that effervescence and that passion for what you're doing. And I believe the universe will conspire to find a way to help you achieve that when you put that energy forth of, I want to achieve this. So anyways, super long answer to your question, which is, this stuff's expensive. I don't have the money or a trust fund to lean on to do this stuff. And I have a very entrepreneurial streak and ability to say, hey, what assets do I have in this moment? $10,000, let's make a website. Obviously, my life has evolved and changed since then. I've had a number of other financial successes, but have all come from a place of passion and what impact I want to have in the world, and having that really dedicated why. It's not, I want $500,000 because I want my bank account to be more full. It's, I want to do this. I'm passionate about pursuing this. And through that passion, I want to impact people positively. So that gives you that juice, that energy to keep pushing forward when the first 1,000 people say no to you, and you still want to ask the 1,001st person the next question.
I think the abundance mindset is a great handhold. I mean, let's face it. I've met a lot of people who have never met a glass half full. They've never seen a glass half full. Never, every single one is half empty. And the abundance scarcity mindset is absolutely true. But I think what you just described is tapping into something different. Your abundance mindset did get you moving, but I would call it more a reap what you sow. You talk about the universe bringing things back. If I look at God as a personal entity, a personal deity, he says, reap what you sow. Mm-hmm. You plant a lot of seeds, Colin, a lot. I mean, you just kept planting and kept planting and kept planting, and therefore you reap something. Most people, they plant one seed, it's one and done, literally one and done. Well, I don't see anything coming up there, forget it. You just kept going, kept going, and all of a sudden, bam, something happened. That actually is fascinating to me, because that tells me that you are intellectually and emotionally more resilient than you are physically resilient. We only know about your physical resiliency because of your emotional and intellectual resiliency. That's really impressive.
Yeah, and to me, the whole thing, and again, why I framed this book, The 12-Hour Rock, around this concept of a possible mindset, because you could meet LeBron James or someone like that, and you're like, okay, like I'm not 6'8", and can like dunk a basketball, like, right? That's like, I mean, obviously he's all sorts of things, not just a physical specimen, but he's like I'm just not that tall, like I'm just not that, that's not my genetic makeup. But I fundamentally believe that we all have the tools to cultivate this mindset. We have the ability to work on these mental exercises to really unlock our best lives, which is why the subtitle of the book is Invest One Day, Conquer Your Mind, and Unlock Your Best Life. Like, it really is within that mindset. And another one of my favorite, phrases or thoughts is, failure plus perseverance equals success. I always say, like, I either won or I learned, right? So like, in trying a bunch of things, to your point, planting all of those seeds, I didn't realize that the 1,000 other times I gave this elevator pitch about the Explorers Grand Slam, when the guy said no to me, it's easy to be like, I tried it, I pitched it, and whoever, guy or girl I was pitching at that moment just said no to me. Okay, you failed. But actually, I learned how to say my thing maybe one word more articulately, maybe one more, sharper, maybe one more dialed into the concept. So the 1,000th time, when I'm unbeknownst standing in front of the CEO of Nike, I have a 30-second polished elevator pitch that comes off authentic and genuine, meaning those other perceived failures, they weren't failures, they were learning. And you pair that learning with the perseverance, you end up with success. You end up with that abundance. And that mindset is something that we all have the ability to tap into, for sure. And actually, even, again, why the walk I think is so powerful is, you start the walk and go 12 hours. Like, I can't spend 12 hours by myself. Like, that's too far. Like, that's too hard. Like, what? Like, no, like, that's too much. And I'm like, you know what? Every person listening here, actually you can. And that's just your limiting belief telling you, oh, I can't do that. That's too hard. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not an athlete. I'm not even asking you to be an athlete. I'm literally saying 12 hours tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, that time is going to pass. And at the end of that, if you've proved to yourself, wait, I do have the perseverance, I do have the grit, I have the ability to commit to something and stick to it for an entire day, what's the ripple effect of that throughout all the rest of your life? When you have your new idea, when you want to start that new business, when you want to, stick with it with a person or a relationship that's tough in the moment, rather than cutting and running, you go, okay, no, I want to stick to this. And so the 12-hour walk is really just a metaphor or a lesson for all of these things that you can then apply to your own life. And like I say, unlock your best life as a result.
Well, we've got to learn to trust and obey our own voice. When I go for a workout, I will actually say out loud what I'm going to do, because I want to obey my own voice. Because if I can't obey my own voice and listen to my own voice, how am I going to listen to anybody else's voice? So I'll just say it today. Today, I'm doing a leg workout and shoulder workout, and it's going to include lunges. I just said it. Damn, I got to do that. I hate lunges. I hate lunges. They're awful. But when I say it, like, okay, I got to get it in. Speaking of lunges, let's get to Everest. Everest. And your wife wasn't a climber. What kind of training did she have to do to be able to have a shot at Everest?
I'm going to answer that question, but I'd be remiss to not say one thing about what you said, because I just love what you said so much about saying it out loud and the power of that. I had the worst day ever in Antarctica. My first day pulling my sled, I literally couldn't even pull my sled the first day, and I almost gave up. And the following morning, I got up. I was crying so much, I actually had frozen tears on my cheek. That's like the all-time most pathetic feeling in the world. Like, that's how down on myself I was. But I fundamentally believe we are the stories that we tell ourselves. We're the stories that we tell ourselves, exactly like you said, and actually expressing that out loud. And I'd never done that myself. I'd always kind of interior dialogue. But in the most negative moment, I got outside of my tent in Antarctica and I yelled at the top of my lungs as I'm saying all this negative things inside my head. I go, Colin, you are strong. You are capable. You are strong. You are capable. And every single day in Antarctica, I would say, I'd jump out of bed and out loud as I could, to actually say it out loud. You are strong, you are capable, and to start rewriting that story inside my head. So anyways, I love that. I'm doing this lunge workout, whatever that is. In the context of my wife, I'll segue there, which is, she started from a place of, do you think I could do this one day, kind of thing. And part of that was claiming that identity. It's very easy to say, let me tell you the reasons I can't. Well, I'm not a climber. Right? I'm not a this. That's such a common thing to say, because we get to a point in our adult life and we say to ourselves, I am this and I'm not this. We kind of like bifurcate ourselves in these groups. But a growth mindset says, I might not be this thing in this moment, but I can imagine myself learning to become this thing. And there's so much power in that. And like I said, when you're young, there seems to be more possibilities. And as we get older, we start telling ourselves, I'm good at math, I'm bad at art, I'm not creative, I'm this, right? We kind of filter ourselves in this. But I try to encourage people to break free from that. So my wife did exactly that, which is says, I acknowledge in this moment right now, I am not an Everest climber. I am not a climber to that standard, But she also said, but do you think I can become one? And so it was an incredible journey. We trained her up for a year. We're about to get ready to go. We're going to climb. You can climb.
Hold on right there. Trained her up for a year means what? Like, what does a training regimen look like for her a week?
We live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Jealous.
Yeah. So I'm looking out my window at the Tetons right now. So it helps to have some mountains like that
in our way to rub it in. Thanks.
In our backyard. Twofold, really. I mean, obviously there's many layers of that, but everything from literally, training to climb by climbing, like actually being in the mountains, getting after it. Obviously, I can help her with all the technical elements. So teaching her how to use an ice axe, how to use crampons, how to this kind of stuff, as well as honestly, I think that sometimes we overthink training in the sense of like, if you're training for something big, it has to be so much harder. We did a lot of probably what you do for her. Body weight exercises, lunges, squats, core stability, the fundamentals. Like at the end of the day, I've done some pretty extravagant training and I've done some pretty epic training specifically for some of my, out there expeditions that required that kind of really, really extra layer of stuff. But none of that stuff matters without the fundamentals of really kind of the consistency. And I also just believe in consistency so much, right? It's like, it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm going to run this marathon you've never run before. And then you run every day for 3 months and maybe you get injured or maybe you don't. And then you do the race or something like that. But you're going to get more out of your whole life of running if you just 4 times a week, run 3 miles, 3 miles a day, 4 days a week, it's going to do more than this 1 month I ran 200 miles or something like that.
Right.
And so I'm just a big believer in the fundamentals. Obviously, we could talk for hours, the granular, what the exact training protocol look like, but I love to encourage people, and it's just no different. Like, so much of my training, even these world-class world record things, of course, there's a little special sauce here and there, but a lot of it comes down to consistency and fundamentals, and training my wife was no different than that. But here's the catch. COVID happens. We literally have our bags packed and we're going to climb Everest I climbed it in 2016 from the Nepal side, which is, I guess, the more common side, although a lot of people climb from China, but you can also climb Everest from China. Not a lot of people know this, but the border of China and Nepal is the summit of Everest. And so we decided to climb from the Chinese side. I'd never been there before, and I thought that'd be a great, unique, different way to see Everest. And she was excited about that route. And we have flights to China for April 4th, 2020. Obviously we didn't take that flight. The world was shut down just a couple of weeks before we were departing. And in that COVID lockdown, as I said, we were on the Oregon coast in Oregon for that COVID lockdown where I'm from. And Jenna gave up. I mean, she's okay with me sharing this. She gave up. She was like, you know what? Like, I trained for a year. It didn't work out. It's a red flag. Like, I'm not going to train anymore. And I was like, oh, we're just having a down moment. It's a weird moment. Like, let's get you back in the routine and we can do it next year. And so she just actually said very adamantly to me, like, no, like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to climb Everest anymore. Like, I'm done. And so for the next year, all through 2020 and the early part of 2021, she didn't train. Literally did not train. I mean, did she like go on a hike here and there? Sure. Did we still live our normal life? Fine. But like, she was not training and not climbing Everest. And a year went by and it was the spring of 2021. And I decided we had put this money down to climb Everest the year before. And we had enough credit from that to have one climber go back. And so we were like, well, it's like on credit and I would like to go back to Everest. So I was like, if you're not going to go, I'm going to go climb Everest, but in a different way without supplemental oxygen and trying to link these two peaks together. Doesn't matter, but it's this thing that no one had ever done before. Kind of an extreme kind of version of that. And I was like, but why don't you come to base camp with me? Why don't you come to base camp with me? And she was like, great. I've never seen Everest. I've seen all your pictures from the last time you were there. Like, I'd love to come to base camp with you. So we leave on this expedition. She doesn't bring any of her expedition stuff, just enough for like trekking and hiking and, whatever. And she's just going to stay in base camp with me. So we hiked there, 17,000 feet takes you like 10 days to hike to base camp. It's still a pretty significant, hike to get there. And we get there and she gets this glint in her eye. Like, I'm like, well, your trekking permit technically gives you the ability to go up 2 camps higher on Everest. So Mount Everest is actually, there's 4 camps above base camp and then the summit. And you got to go up and acclimatize and come back down. You probably know this. I was like, why don't you just come to camp 1 with me? You were so strong getting to base camp. She's like, do you think? I don't know. I didn't train for this. Still kind of in that loop. But I convinced her and she climbs to camp 1 and she does amazing. She climbs like so strong and so fast and so well. Why don't you come to camp 2 with me? She comes to camp 2 with me. But that's where her permit ends. She's like, okay, enough. And at camp 2 on Everest is where you can like see the summit. You're still 10,000 feet below it, but it's like this incredible mountain amphitheater. And I need to climb up to camp 4 to acclimatize, spend a few days up there, and then climb back down. So I said, just wait for me here in camp 2 for a few days. So 21,000 feet. She's up there. I have to leave her, which I'm kind of nervous about, but I go up and I have to do my thing. And so I climb up to 26,000 feet into the death zone, spend a couple of days up really high. I'm getting my body acclimatized. And then what you do from there is you go all the way back down to base camp and you rest. And then you wait for a weather window to go for the summit. And I come back down to camp 2 and she's just got this glint in her eye like I've never seen before. And she goes, oh man, I wish I had trained this year. I guess we're going to have to come back one day. Maybe one day I can climb Everest. And we get back down to base camp and we get back caught in this storm. We're there for a couple weeks and a couple weeks go by and she goes, what if one day was today? Just kind of throws it out there. You can see it just awesome. Like she's chewing on it in her brain. And you can see where this is going. But basically, I was like, well, we don't have the permit and we don't have an Everest summit suit. We don't have a gear, like all the things we don't have. But again, that possible mindset switches in and goes, okay, we don't always have these things in these moments, but can we problem solve this? So I start asking all my friends and whatever, get in touch with the Nepalese Board of Tourism, et cetera. And we source her a down summit suit. We get the latest permit that's ever been issued to climb Everest. And long story short, the June 1st of last year in 2021, we make it up to the summit of Everest together. And to me, the moral of this story, there's so many morals, but and I tell it in richer detail in the 12-hour walk, but it's easy to give up on yourself momentarily, but there's also something super power in the incremental. Like, I'm just going to go to base camp. Yeah. Let me go to camp 1, see how I feel. And Jenna's interior dialogue, fighting all those various limiting beliefs. I'm not a this, I'm not a climber. Yes. I didn't train, I didn't this, but then incrementally proving those things out and being like, wait, I'm a little stronger than I thought I was. How much further can I go? Is there a
book that you've read or resource that's the best explanation of limiting beliefs? I'm using that phrase more and more. I mean, for our listeners who don't know, limiting beliefs are the things that you believe that are actually limiting you. You believe them to be true, but they're actually limiting you. I'm just limiting belief. What would the example be? I'm just not a workout person. I'm just not a workout person. Okay, that's a limiting belief. So you believe you can't work out and you will die earlier and you won't have as full of a life. Limiting belief. I'll never get over my family of origin pain. Okay. You believe you're never going to get over it? You're never limiting belief. I can't do Everest. No, you said no. It's back to reap what you sow. Hey, we're going to work this out. We're going to plant seeds here. Let's keep going until we come to an absolute granite wall. Dude, I'll tell you, I thought this is going to be about physical feats, and you've talked physical feats, but the thing I'm most impressed about is your mind. The book of Proverbs says, as a man thinketh, so is he. I mean, your thought life, brother, your thought life and how you problem solve is really all world.
I appreciate
Dude, seriously, hyper impressed with you. And you're smiling. And you're one of these manly man, like, measure my rope kind of guys who's done every kind of thing you could possibly think. And you're smiling. You're not trying to prove yourself. You're a good dude, brother. You are. I like to eat Kellogg's Lucky Charms with you sometime.
Well, I'm going to work on that accent for the next time you have me back on. I'm going to really work that through. But look, the limiting beliefs and the reason I think that's so powerful, it's literally there's 10 main chapters in my book, and they're all broken down around a singular limiting belief. And so literally, from chapter to top of bonds, I hate being uncomfortable. I'm not a this, all the things you aren't. I'm broken. I'll never be the same. I'm afraid of what people will say. I'm afraid of failing. I don't know what to do. I don't have the right friends. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have what it takes. Those are the limiting beliefs. And I break each one of those down through a rich story, then tell you how you can overcome them and how the walk can be a metaphor for that. And the conclusion to each chapter is the reframe on that, which is with a possible mindset. So the first one was, I hate being uncomfortable. Now the opposite of that, the possible mindset says, I love stepping out of my comfort zone because it leads to fulfillment. I can learn, I can grow, and I can become anything. I can heal even if I've been broken. I can stand back up even if I've been knocked down. I can dare greatly even facing the possibility of criticism. I know that failures are the foundation of my success. Winners lose the most. I trust my gut. I do know the answer. I have the power to choose friends who will help me to become the best version of myself. I have enough time and I spend it wisely. I believe that money is abundant and I can have it too. I have what it takes to climb my Everest. And so the book is a frame on, we have these limiting beliefs. We all deal with them, myself included. I'm not like saying, oh, I'm above this. I'm putting you in the story going, let me show you all the times that I had this limiting belief myself. Like I'm not some superhuman person. I'm human. I have these limiting beliefs. But guess what? These are just beliefs, and beliefs can be rewritten, reframed, restructured. And so by the end of this book, and more importantly, by the end of this walk, I believe we can all cultivate that possible mindset and switch that limiting belief into that possible mindset, into that positive affirmation, which ultimately, as you well know, my friend, changes everything.
Colin, this has been fantastic. I'd love to have you back sometime. Would you come back on the Aggressive Life sometime?
Will be my pleasure.
I had a bunch of things I wanted to get into and talk about. Like, they're just things like, okay, how much water should we be drinking every day? Like, what's your diet plan? Well, a lot of that stuff, I find that not really interesting to ask right now, given what we've talked about, but I'd love to get in with that in that stuff with you, as well as some other things. So, Dirt, I actually gave Dirt a microphone today. Derek, can we hear your voice?
He did, and I didn't use it very much.
I didn't ask you anything today either.
I was too mesmerized by Colin's story.
It was fun. Are you ready to go work out now?
Yeah, I'm gonna go do some lunges.
I am like, put me in, coach. Put me in.
What I want to know is, are you going to do the 12-hour walk? Are you going to take one day, walk out your front door, and walk in silence for a day? Are you going to commit to that?
No, that's fine. I just did that last week. So no, seriously,
Right.
our whole staff has a day of solitude where we do just that. So it's kind of in my spiritual rhythms with God, solitude and mental space and disconnecting. That's just a normal part of the rhythm. So that wouldn't be as challenging for me as it is for somebody else. But I do love my phone too. I'm not saying I'm anti-phone. I just have a brand new iPhone right here. Ooh,
no, there it is. There it is.
Pro with the 3 big. So I like tech stuff.
I love my phone too, but I think it's useful to take one day alone in your thoughts without any external inputs. And but we literally built an app for the 12-hour walk. You can download it, and it actually tracks your walk. And as the map populates, it's like, hey, I'm the first person in Utah to do it. I'm the 100th person in New York City to do it. I'm the 1,000th person. My goal, my Everest really is to inspire 10 million people to take the 12-hour walk and to be a part of this community of like-minded people and tracking people worldwide while they do it, and inspiring others to take that change in their own life. So people can visit the 12hourwalk.com, download the app, buy the book, all the things. Most importantly, if you do none of those things, I don't care, because you can do this by just literally putting on your shoes, putting a day on the calendar, and walking out your front door and stepping into your new life.
All right, so what I was going to end with. How can people find you? You just told us 12-hour walk, and I said I was done asking questions, but I got to ask one. It just occurs to me. I'm serious. You have smiled more during this interaction than anybody I've had the whole time, and it's not like I can tell it's not a smile where it's just a nervous smile, because I know some people like nervous smile. They smile all the time and they talk and like relax your Botox face. It's not a nervous smile. It's just a habit smile. No, you're generally and genuinely just smiling about something you're talking about. You always been like that? How did you get that? Any tips for us on how to be better attitude people?
I think that, a quote that I love because it's a stark reminder is the Thoreau quote that says, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." And people often misquote it, but I love the second half misquote, which is, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation and die with their song still inside of them." He didn't actually write that last part, but it's a darn good second half of that quote. The flip side of that's kind of there's a darkness around that quote, an acknowledgement of people being unhappy or unfulfilled. But I think the smile that you're seeing on my face comes from the opposite of that, which is by following my heart, by following my passion, even when it's been unpopular and untraditional. And I've said no to opportunities or money or the obvious paved path of certain things based on whatever, to say no, to really check in with myself and my interior and say, what's the most important thing to me? And living in alignment with that passion has allowed me, I guess, I don't know, I didn't realize I was smiling so much, but allows me to, like I said, like I'm on here talking about the 12-hour walk, not because I care to sell books and make money doing that. I really don't care about that. I care about it because I'm passionate about it. I want to leave a positive impact on the world, whatever that is for you. Whatever lights you up. For you, it's I can see it in you when you enter the podcast. Like, you love doing this. You obviously love being a pastor and the community that you connect with, not because of the status it gives you or this, that, the other thing, because you're in alignment with your values. And so I think for me, no matter what that is, so to speak, like I said before, no matter what your Everest is, it could be anything, but pursuing your passion with an open heart, I think is really the core fundamental thing towards peace, happiness, fulfillment, etc.
Colin O'Brady is his name. The 12-hour walk is his game. Kellogg's Lucky Charms are his food. I don't know why I find that so funny. You're probably never even eat sugared cereal. You're probably just eating granola every morning.
Not much. And like I said, I got a fake last name anyway. So.
Hey, man, awesome time. Great. Hey, here's the thing, everybody. You don't have to go to Everest. You don't have to walk across Antarctica. But here's the thing I'm getting from Colin. Man, you need to figure out what it is that's going to put a smile on your face. And it's probably something that's more action-oriented. It's probably something that you don't have right now. It's probably something that's going to take a little effort. Reap what you sow. Push out. Abundance mindset. Do something with your life today to honor your life and enjoy your life. And I'm thankful for our guests and my new friend, and maybe Dirt, absolutely one of the favorite guests I've had. So Colin, really, I don't say that. I don't say
that
seriously.
Means a lot. That means a lot. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here.
All right, man. We'll do it again. So, hey, that's it. We'll see you next time on The Aggressive Life. Hey, thanks for listening. For all things aggressive living, why don't you head over to briantome.com. Find my new book, Move, a guide to get up and go forward, as well as articles and much, much more. And no matter where you listen to podcasts, why don't you take a second and leave us a rating, leave us a review. It really, really helps us drive new listeners to the show. We want to help as many people as possible, just like we may have helped you. We want to help others. So why don't you help us out? And if you want to connect, find me on Instagram at Brian Tome. Aggressive Life with Brian Tome is a production of Crossroads Church, Cincinnati, Ohio.